You probably think the Smithsonian Institution and the National Archives are just harmless public museums proudly displaying dinosaur bones and dusty historical relics. You are entirely wrong. They are not merely museums. They are deep, subterranean vaults specifically designed to lock away the absolute terrifying truth. What if all of recorded history, modern science, and your most fundamental beliefs are nothing but a carefully staged play? What if the absolute most powerful and terrifying fragments of human history are currently locked away forever beneath thousands of tons of heavy government concrete? We are about to open those sealed doors. I have carefully designed the roadmap of this investigation so that every single suppressed secret we uncover becomes exponentially more dangerous than the last, heavily favoring the mind, shattering latter revelations over the former anomalies. Before we step into the absolute pitch black of these vaults, please take one quick second to register and subscribe to the channel. Your active support is the exact tool we need to keep dragging these terrifying historical cover-ups into the light. Now let us return to the shadows. We are not just looking at misplaced artifacts. We are tracking a deliberate, century-long campaign of global erasure. From the confiscated biological remains of completely unknown humanoid species to the absolute suppression of limitless cosmic energy, these restricted archives conceal paradigm-shifting nightmares. What exactly are the elite so desperate to hide from you? Are you genuinely ready to see the unedited script of humanity? We have officially opened the heavy doors to the archives. Press number 1 in the comments right now if you believe human evolution is actively hiding massive, world-changing secrets. Let us begin our descent into the restricted files by examining the sprawling, ancient Native American burial mounds scattered heavily across the American Midwest, particularly in the Ohio River Valley. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as the young nation aggressively expanded westward, pioneers, farmers, and early archaeologists began heavily excavating these massive, highly organized dirt structures. What they pulled out of the dark earth was not standard pottery or typical flint arrowheads. Instead, local and national newspapers, including highly reputable publications of the era, began publishing frantic, highly detailed reports of workers unearthing colossal human skulls. They were pulling massive, fully intact human skeletons out of the ground, measuring anywhere from 7 to well over 10 feet tall. These terrifying biological anomalies possessed heavily reinforced jawbones, incredibly thick femurs, and sometimes even featured bizarre anatomical traits like double rows of teeth. This widespread physical discovery is profoundly impressive because it completely shatters all known, accepted limits of human biological growth and standard anthropology. It strongly suggests that a completely different, highly dominant branch of the human family tree successfully lived, hunted, and thrived across the North American continent thousands of years before the arrival of any modern indigenous populations. These were not random genetic mutations. These were entire communities of giants. Their existence fundamentally rewrites the entire established timeline of human migration, biological evolution, and species development. Yet, what makes this incredible historical period so deeply unexplained and undeniably sinister is the immediate, highly aggressive response from the powerful Smithsonian Institution. Almost exactly as soon as these massive skeletons made local headlines, elite agents would reportedly swoop into these small rural towns like circling vultures. Under the strict, unquestionable guise of national scientific preservation, they would systematically confiscate the giant remains directly from the bewildered locals. The massive bones were quickly packed away into heavy wooden crates, loaded securely onto guarded trains headed east, and then simply vanished forever into the deep subterranean vaults of the museum. The Smithsonian absolutely and coldly refuses to acknowledge they ever held these anomalous bones, casually dismissing thousands of historical newspaper articles as mere rural hoaxes. The terrifying question is why a powerful institution dedicated entirely to science would deliberately erase such monumental physical evidence. The answer rests purely in maintaining ideological control. Acknowledging a lost, highly advanced race of giants would deliver a fatal, crushing blow to the carefully constructed, rigid evolutionary narrative the academic elite had just spent decades painstakingly building. To maintain absolute intellectual dominance over the public mind, an entire ancient race of giants had to be ruthlessly assassinated for a second time, entirely eradicated from the official pages of human history. If that was not surprising enough, completely erasing the physical bones of a lost species is merely the very first level of this massive government cover-up. Hiding ancient biological skeletons is relatively easy when your institution strictly controls the global flow of scientific information. But what exactly happens when the heavily suppressed artifact is not just a few hidden crates of old bones, but an entire, sprawling subterranean empire hiding completely out in the open? What happens when the academic elite desperately try to cover up the undeniable remnants of a highly advanced Egyptian civilization buried deep inside the absolute most famous natural landmark in America? We left the buried giant skeletons of the Midwest behind, but what happens when the suppressed artifact is not just a few crates of old bones, but an entire sprawling underground empire? Before we descend into this terrifying, restricted abyss, please take a brief moment to subscribe to the channel so we can continue exposing these massive historical cover-ups together. We must now travel to the massive, unforgiving landscape of the American Southwest. The year is 1909. The Phoenix Gazette, a highly reputable newspaper, suddenly publishes a massive, front-page article detailing an unbelievable discovery. An explorer named G.E. Kincaid, supposedly operating under the direct funding and guidance of the Smithsonian Institution, was navigating the treacherous, freezing waters of the Colorado River deep inside the Grand Canyon. High up on the sheer, inaccessible red rock cliffs, he discovered a massive, artificial cave entrance. When Kincaid lit his torch and stepped into the pitch-black darkness, he did not find an empty cavern. He discovered a sprawling, highly engineered subterranean citadel capable of housing upwards of 50,000 people. The specific details he reported are absolutely staggering. The freezing tunnels were lined with giant, meticulously carved statues resembling ancient Eastern and Egyptian gods. He found intricate copper weapons, massive grain storage bins, and walls entirely covered in complex hieroglyphs completely foreign to any known Native American culture. But the most terrifying discovery lay in the deepest, darkest chambers. Kincaid reported finding hundreds of human mummies, heavily wrapped in dark linen and perfectly preserved in the dry, freezing air of the canyon. This massive discovery is profoundly impressive because it single-handedly destroys the rigid, accepted timeline of global human history. It strongly implies that a highly advanced, ancient transoceanic civilization successfully crossed the treacherous oceans and established a sophisticated, heavily fortified subterranean empire in the Americas thousands of years before Christopher Columbus was even born. Yet, what makes this incredible archaeological site so deeply strange and entirely chilling is the absolute, deafening silence that violently followed the initial newspaper report. The Smithsonian Institution completely and coldly denies this expedition ever took place. They aggressively claim that an explorer named G.E. Kincaid never worked for them and does not exist in their official records. They insist there are absolutely no Egyptian mummies, no ancient artifacts, and no underground citadel hidden in the canyon. The absolute greatest archaeological discovery in human history was instantly pushed into the dark, sealed shut by a massive, eerily silent government lie. To this very day, the specific area where Kincaid allegedly found the cave entrance remains strictly off-limits, heavily restricted by the federal government, and entirely closed to the public under the threat of severe legal penalties. If that was not surprising enough, completely denying the ancient past is one thing. The elite can relatively easily hide silent mummies and dusty caves from a civilian population that cannot legally reach them. But what happens when the heavily suppressed secret does not belong to the ancient past, but violently crashes directly into the modern era? What exactly happens when the government desperately tries to cover up an explosive, fiery, highly advanced anomaly that slammed into the earth right in front of the modern American military machine? We left the ancient silence of the Grand Canyon behind, but what happens when a heavily suppressed secret violently crashes directly into the modern era? Press number 3 in the comments right now if you firmly believe the government is actively hiding extraterrestrial contact from the global public. We must now direct our attention to the sprawling, desolate deserts of Roswell, New Mexico, in the hot summer of 1947. A blinding, fiery crash suddenly tore through the quiet night sky, shattering the peace of the remote landscape and altering the trajectory of human history. The United States military initially reacted with sheer, unadulterated panic. Heavily armed units from the 509th Bomb Group, which was the absolute most elite nuclear strike force in the entire world at the time, aggressively cordoned off a massive debris field scattered across a local ranch. The bewildered soldiers recovered bizarre, unbendable metallic wreckage that would perfectly regain its shape after being crushed. They found strange, incredibly lightweight foil stamped with incomprehensible hieroglyphs, and highly classified, heavily redacted reports even detailed the terrifying recovery of alleged non-human biological entities scattered among the scorching desert sand. The situation was so overwhelmingly unprecedented that the public relations officer of the military base hastily issued an official press release to the eager national media. They openly and proudly declared that the military had successfully captured a crashed flying saucer. This explosive historical event is profoundly impressive because it represents the exact, undeniable moment the entire American military machine frantically admitted, entirely on the public record, to successfully recovering an extraterrestrial craft. We are not talking about blurry, questionable photographs or vague, unreliable eyewitness rumors whispered in the dark. The initial, shocking confirmation came directly from the absolute highest, most trusted levels of the United States Armed Forces. The very same elite military unit exclusively entrusted with guarding and deploying the devastating atomic bomb officially told the world that humanity was definitively not alone in the universe. It was the absolute pinnacle of human evolution and scientific discovery playing out in real time, validating centuries of profound cosmic speculation and fundamentally changing our place among the stars. Yet, what makes the Roswell incident so deeply terrifying and entirely chaotic is the brutally aggressive, desperate cover-up that violently followed. Just hours after that initial explosive press release shocked the globe, the federal government violently reversed its narrative. The incredibly powerful military command hastily stuttered out a pathetic, cheap, and entirely illogical cover story, frantically claiming the indestructible, memory-retaining metal was merely a downed rubber weather balloon. The sheer chaos and frantic, uncoordinated suppression exposed a profound, institutional fear radiating from the shadow government. High-ranking military officers were quickly silenced. Local civilian witnesses were heavily threatened with severe federal prison time, and the authentic extraterrestrial wreckage was completely swallowed by impenetrable, underground military bunkers. The original, uncensored intelligence files regarding this monumental cosmic contact were shoved deep into the darkest archival vaults, violently slamming the heavy iron door on humanity ever communicating with the wider universe. If that was not surprising enough, the shadowy federal government successfully locked away our rightful place in the cosmos by aggressively threatening frightened citizens and selfishly hoarding alien wreckage. They effectively stole our cosmic reality. But what happens when these exact same elite intelligence agencies do not just steal crashed alien metal from a remote desert, but actively raid a cheap hotel room to violently confiscate a brilliant human invention that could have made the entire world completely free from financial slavery? We left the stolen cosmic wreckage of Roswell hidden in military bunkers, but what happens when elite intelligence agencies quietly raid a cheap hotel room to violently confiscate a brilliant human invention capable of freeing the entire world? Press number 4 in the comments right now if you firmly believe corporate greed is actively holding back human technological evolution. We must now step into the cold silence of room 3327 at the famous New Yorker hotel. The exact date is January 7th, 1943. The world is heavily distracted by the raging global war, but inside this small, incredibly cheap room, one of the absolute greatest scientific minds in human history has just drawn his final breath. Nikola Tesla is dead, but before his physical body is even completely cold, the room is suddenly breached. There are no loud military sirens and no panicked soldiers. Instead, mysterious federal agents, widely believed to be working directly for the FBI and the secretive Office of Alien Property, aggressively flood into the confined space. In absolute, suffocating silence, they begin systematically packing away the entire physical legacy of a once-in-a-generation genius. They fill heavy cardboard boxes with thousands of private documents, complex mathematical calculations, incredibly advanced scientific journals, and delicate scale models. The specific details of what they stole are absolutely staggering. Tesla was not just designing slightly better commercial light bulbs. He was allegedly on the absolute brink of releasing world-altering technology focused entirely on wireless power transmission. His confiscated blueprints detailed massive, highly advanced machines theoretically capable of pulling infinite, completely free zero-point energy directly from the invisible atmospheric ether of the Earth. He fully intended to transmit this boundless electricity through the air to every single remote corner of the globe, completely free of charge for all of humanity. This heavily suppressed technology is profoundly impressive because it represents an immediate, utopian leap in human civilization. Tesla vividly envisioned a brilliant world, utterly devoid of heavy power lines, burning coal pits, and restrictive electric meters. He desperately wanted to completely eradicate the entire concept of energy scarcity, directly empowering the poorest populations on the planet and eliminating the fundamental need for brutal resource-driven wars. Yet, what makes this silent hotel raid so deeply chilling and thoroughly corrupt is the obvious, cold-blooded financial motive driving the suppression. An entire era of fossil fuel-free prosperity was quietly assassinated without a single shot ever being fired. Massive, incredibly powerful global energy conglomerates and greedy banking elites breathed a profound sigh of relief as humanity's brilliant future was shoved tightly into dusty government boxes. The federal government heavily classified his visionary, world-changing work under the strict, unquestionable guise of absolute national security, but the true, underlying goal was maintaining absolute economic control over the global population. We were deliberately left entirely dependent on a highly profitable, heavily metered grid of fossil fuels, completely doomed to drown in endless electric bills and artificial scarcity, because a free, fully energized world simply cannot be heavily taxed or strictly controlled. If that was not surprising enough, the shadowy suppression of infinite free energy was a monumental crime against our ultimate potential, but it was executed quietly in the dark. The elite easily hid scientific blueprints from a highly distracted public. But what happens when the absolute most terrifying secret of the modern era cannot be hidden in a dark hotel room? What exactly happens when the ultimate, bloody collapse of the democratic illusion does not occur in the shadows, but violently plays out in broad daylight, right in front of millions of deeply traumatized citizens? We left the cold, silent suppression of Nikola Tesla and his infinite free energy locked away in a New York hotel. But what happens when the absolute most terrifying secret of the modern era violently plays out in broad daylight? Press number 5 in the comments right now if you firmly believe the government is still actively hiding the true architects of our modern history. We must now step directly into the bright sunshine of Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. The exact date is November 22nd, 1963. The absolute most powerful man on the planet, President John F. Kennedy, is riding slowly in an open-top limousine alongside his wife. Standing on a small concrete pedestal is a local dressmaker named Abraham Zapruder, holding a standard Bell & Howell home movie camera. In a matter of seconds, his rolling 8mm film captures the exact, horrifying moment the head of the president is violently shattered by high-velocity gunfire. The public was eventually shown a heavily edited, carefully sanitized version of this gruesome footage to support the fabricated narrative of a lone, unstable gunman. However, the complete, unedited original cut of the Zapruder film, alongside thousands of highly classified, razor-sharp intelligence documents, was instantly swallowed by the massive, impenetrable vaults of the National Archives. This specific historical event is profoundly impressive because it was not a secret military operation hidden in a dark desert, nor was it a quiet FBI raid in a lonely hotel room. This was the highly public, incredibly bloody execution of a sitting American president, conducted flawlessly right in front of hundreds of screaming civilian witnesses and rolling television cameras. It was a perfectly executed, ruthless coup d'etat orchestrated in the very middle of a bustling, modern American city. The absolute pinnacle of the American dream was violently dismantled in mere seconds, leaving behind a profound, terrifying void of accountability. The sheer audacity and flawless coordination required to pull off such a massive public assassination is absolutely staggering. Yet, what makes this horrific event so deeply sinister and terrifyingly relevant today is the absolute, unyielding refusal of the government to release the truth. Despite massive public outcry, strict federal laws mandating total transparency, and decades of endless congressional investigations, the United States government absolutely refuses to completely declassify and release the final, unredacted intelligence files. The establishment continues to illegally lock away thousands of pages of critical evidence under the vague, unquestionable guise of national security. The terrifying question is why? If the complete original files were finally exposed to the global public, they would not merely reveal the shocking identity of a second shooter standing on the grassy knoll. They would completely shred the fragile, comforting illusion of modern democracy, exposing the horrifying reality that our modern political systems are merely a theatrical distraction. Exposing the unredacted truth would publicly unmask the true, faceless shadow government that genuinely pulls the strings of global power. It would definitively prove that these invisible elites can publicly and violently assassinate the most heavily guarded leader on the planet without facing a single legal consequence. If that was not surprising enough, this realization completely shatters everything we are taught to believe about human freedom. We are left staring into the dark abyss of a heavily manufactured reality. If the exact same shadowy entities sworn to protect our democratic history are the very architects meticulously hiding it from us, what ultimate, haunting lesson must we finally accept about the invisible, concrete prison we blindly inhabit every single day? As we stand before the massive, impenetrable concrete doors of the National Archives, we are forced to confront a deeply unsettling reality about the world we blindly inhabit. We journeyed through the darkest, most restricted vaults of human history. We witnessed the erasure of ancient giants in the Midwest, and we stared into the frozen Egyptian tombs hidden deep beneath the Grand Canyon. We felt the sheer, chaotic military panic of a cosmic crash in Roswell, mourned the cold-blooded assassination of infinite free energy in a cheap New York hotel room, and finally witnessed the brutal, bloody collapse of the democratic illusion in the bright sunshine of Dallas. Every confiscated artifact proves the greatest threat to our civilization is not an invading army, but the shadowy architects meticulously editing our shared reality. Before we reflect on this haunting truth, please take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel so we can continue dragging these historical cover-ups into the light. The true terror of these archives is not merely the stolen artifacts themselves. It is the profound realization that these subterranean vaults were never built to protect us from the dangerous truth. They were specifically designed to imprison us within a highly controlled, artificial narrative. We desperately want to believe the modern free world is a brilliant beacon of liberty and democratic progress. But the heavily censored files prove a much darker reality. We are living inside a comfortable prison without visible iron bars, where history is not written by the honest truth, but entirely dictated by the faceless phantoms guarding the deepest vaults. The elite controllers have successfully weaponized our history against us, deciding exactly what we are allowed to know and what we must blindly believe. As you walk away from these vaults and step back into the comforting illusion of normal life, you are left with one terrifying question. The next time you read a standard history book or watch the evening news, are you genuinely learning the truth about humanity, or are you just obediently reading the redacted script they finally decided to declassify?